Hello and welcome to the second episode of the pod Musings on an Evolving World, where today we'll talk about what all the different ways of getting to utopia or dystopia are. Okay, maybe not all. As we now enter a new age, what some might want to call the end of the beginning, while others the beginning of the end. I think this would be as good a time as any to gauge the potential paths in front of us and what we can do as a species to maximize the chances of going on to the ones that paint a pretty picture while minimizing the chance of those which lead us to negative outcomes. Broadly speaking, all the possible scenarios can be bucketed into three groups. 1. Net good, and here the ceiling is a utopia as utopia. 2. Net neutral, with the world largely continuing on its current trend lines, with nary change in any macro sense. And 3. Net negative, the flaw here being complete and utter human extermination or extinction. Assigning probabilities to future outcomes or paths is a formidable endeavor in the simplest of cases, but when the singularity itself becomes part of the equation, the odds become intractable by definition. Having said that, we can be safe in assigning the second bucket a p-value of less than 0.1%. A technological revolution as great as the one we are undergoing, as consequential as any we can imagine an intelligent civilization having, does not leave the status quo unchanged. That is also the position Nick Bostrom holds, the extreme scenarios having the highest p-values. It makes logical sense too, considering that takeoff is likely going to be fast and will have self-reinforcing loops, either virtuous or vicious, that will only increase its inherent momentum the further we go in time. My personal intuition on the curve of possible trajectories is this: an M curve, the p-value on the y-axis and the degree of change on the x-axis, with the midpoint of the curve almost touching the x-axis, or having the lowest probability, and the further we go from the neutral no change scenario, the higher the p-value rise, until it will invert again in both directions and converge closer to x-axis but never hit it, since there will always be the existential threats until we put in interventions in place. A transcendent dependence we are likely to build up. That is a fancy way of saying that the p-value of us dying out is pretty low, but as with any existential threat, it is not so much its likelihood as its tangible impact. In this case, extinguishing of the human flame, the thing that we most care about, that makes us stand up and take notice. If there was an asteroid hurtling towards us that we could assign a p-value of 0.01%, hitting the Earth and rendering all life extinct, you can be damn sure that we would treat that p-value as a certainty. Then why the cognitive dissonance here when we've assigned a significant value to AI risks? There's a whole suite of reasons for this, the most important being the economic, as always. Those winning the AI race stand to gain the greatest treasure there ever was, or there ever will be, and greed has a funny way of reducing the perception of the risks. Then there is the promise of AI unlocking the sun-lit uplands, the reason that most in academia continue to persist despite the risks. For them, the rewards, not financial but human, far outweigh the risks. What AI has done is broaden the scope of humanity's trajectories, both good and bad. Let's say before the advent of AI, there were a million major, meaning minor differences in trajectories bucketed into a major class, possible paths. It has probably increased that number by an order of magnitude. It's not so much the numbers here that are pertinent as the point expressed. The AI will, and has already to some degree, endowed us with powers, wielding which allows us to amplify either the good or the bad. Now let's look at some of the major variables that will determine the path we embark upon. Number 1, what I call the AI buckets, solving the alignment or the control problem. If we don't solve this in time, then all of this will be for naught. This is likely the singularly most important question humanity had ever had to grapple with at any point in its history, but this determines the fate of our species, and I say this without any hint of exaggeration. 2, the human buckets, keeping pace with the technological changes on a societal or institutional level, and even on an individual one for that matter, and thus not waking up one day in a world completely alien to the one we've been living in. This means evolving our modes of being, operating, interacting, working in our institutions, our agendas, our policies, in tandem with a world in which predicting the future and thus counting on our present modes would be nothing more than a fool's errand. And 3. What I succinctly and descriptively call the what if it all goes south, and do we still get alive and relatively unscathed buckets? Building and putting in contingencies in place for number 1, AI going rogue even past the alignment threshold, and 2, AI shutting down. It does seem to be a good idea, even assuming we have figured out the most optimal solution to the alignment problem, to put all our eggs in the AI baskets. This would leave us open to all sorts of vulnerabilities. Let's conduct a quick thought experiment. Imagine that a solar flare has destroyed our electricity infrastructure, or the internet infrastructure specifically. You can well imagine the catastrophe and anarchy that would rain down upon our civilization. Serious people have simulated the same scenario and found that this is a top-level risk that humanity faces. Put this on steroids and then multiply the effect by 1,000x, and you get the effect of complete human dependence on AI, and of that rug being pulled from under our feet, revealing a chasm descending all the way into negative infinity. Ironically, the only non-apparent, non-ideal endgame is a scenario where there is an endgame, either for us or for the AI. If the endgame is for us, that's obviously the worst of all possible outcomes. But in the scenario whereby AI starts becoming ultra powerful and malevolent, either consciously or incidentally, if we have the power to pull off the off switch before it crosses the threshold of allowing us to have that power, we would prevent the worst of it. But our appetite for synthetic intelligence would most likely die out, at least for some millennia, and without AI we would be severely crippled. Not from our current vantage point, but from those of future humans who would have tasted the power that AI gives us. You only know how good something is if you have experienced it firsthand. We still haven't. We've no clue just how empowering AI can be. Well, some clue, otherwise the smartest of our species wouldn't be spending their lives on this problem. We'll cover the broad strokes of the meta themes in this short video. This particular topic, being as consequential as it is, will be a series of a few episodes. More videos on this will be coming soon, as well as a long piece on my blog, if you want to explore this more in depth and with more rigor, and where we actually discuss the parts in detail and some of the thematic makeup of the same. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you the next time this train rolls into town. Cheers.